Welcome back and thank you for staying with us, viewers. I'm Sukanya Sain, you're watching CNN News 18, and we're discussing the historic US and India trade deal that has been signed earlier today. And we are being joined by our reporters Aman Sharma, Pallavi Ghosh, and Akansha Swaroop. Now, Akansha, coming to you first, like we were discussing before the break, before PCR queued about the break in my ears. So you broke the news on Monday at 7 a.m. I remember that when the deal was first announced. Now, Kremlin, after that, they issued a statement saying India is free to buy oil, purchase oil from wherever they want to buy. Fair enough. Now, do you think Kremlin could, moving forward, issue a more concrete statement on this, maybe? The last one was pretty vague. But fair enough, we are free to buy oil from wherever we want. But do you think moving forward, they could, come up with a concrete statement on this?
So one is expecting one to come from the Russian Foreign Ministry. But with Kremlin, in fact, giving us that green signal is only a positive indication. And see, this is how the world operates, and this is how diplomacy operates. In fact, just a day after Prime Minister Modi had that conversation with the US president, you also had the Chinese president, Xi Jinping, have a conversation with the US president. In fact, the Russian president also had a conversation with the Chinese president. And that is exactly how it operates. It may be ruffling feathers in Beijing at the moment. So my concern right now, more than Russia, is China. As I have been highlighting, that it's not like Russia has been a traditional, trading partner when it comes to our purchases of oil and gas. We started trading with them in the year 2022, which is why perhaps it makes sense when the Kremlin is saying that India is free to trade across the globe wherever they get the best prices. And that is how the world market operates. That's how markets across the globe operate. Now, when we talk about our traditional purchases with Moscow, that happened to be defense equipment and our people-to-people ties. So all of that has been our priority, and Prime Minister Modi has always emphasized on multipolarity in his foreign policies, and given his personal warm dynamics and equations with President Putin, I don't think Russia is going to be that much of a roadblock as is going to be China, because the Chinese ambassador on that very day when the trade agreement was being discussed, they were celebrating their Spring Festival. He came out with a speech in which he was reminding India of how India and China go back to sharing civilizational ties. There are greater commonalities, whether it is, say, the belief in India and China's policy of self-reliance, Atmanirbharta, both the countries believing in Vasudev Kutumbakam or world is one. So the indication was that, and he made it a point, interestingly, Sukanya, to actually talk about how there's, India and China have moved on from, say, a reset in ties to a new level of improvement. So China is watching this very, very closely. As I said, even Global Times was abuzz in terms of questioning where the nitty-gritties stand. So you can expect even Chinese media to be very closely dissecting this joint statement that has arrived from both ends. So I don't see Russia as that much of a concern for India as will be China. And with focus coming back onto the Indo-Pacific, we also know that the Chinese president, in that phone conversation he had with the US president, he pressed Donald Trump to not arm Taiwan. So China is back on being on its, China is actually back on tenterhooks at the moment. And we'll have to see how this, in fact, moves forward. As far as a formal statement coming from the Russian Foreign Ministry is concerned, yes, in the days ahead, we should expect one. But like we said, if it's not going to be Russia, and you were speaking to one of the renowned economists, they did highlight that Russian crude is better in terms of Venezuelan crude oil. There are two challenges with Venezuelan crude. Not only is it harder to refine, but India, of course, has the kind of machinery to refine Venezuelan crude. But of course, that means greater cost. More importantly, it is the resurrection of the Venezuelan market, which currently stands extremely dilapidated. Many experts have highlighted how this is going to, in fact, take billions of dollars for the US to invest in many years. So that is the prime concern. Several Indian PSUs are involved in the Venezuelan oil market. We'll have to see how this, in fact, how this is in fact going to take us forward as far as the challenges of buying Venezuelan crude is concerned. Let's not forget, we'll also be increasing our purchase of US oil and gas as well. We've been talking about how India has been increasing its FTAs, the overall footprint in the FTAs. We've seen how we forged one with EU, which in itself is opening us to, say, a 27 member trading bloc. You're looking at forging one in the days ahead with Canada, UK, New Zealand, all of them in just the last few years have been finalized. So we have to look at this trade deal not just through the prism of bringing Russian oil and gas to a screeching halt as far as that purchase is concerned, Sukanya.
Right, Akansha, so continue to stay with us. Coming to Pallavi now. Pallavi, do you think there was any discussion on diversifying India's crude basket over medium term or enhancing US energy exports to India as part of the understanding? If you could tell us very few words, because we have very less time left on this show.
So, kind of very briefly, when I talked about the ministerial committee, the Hardeep Singh Puri was also someone who was very much deeply consulted. Look, India's stand as far as the Venezuelan oil was always that it's a sanctioned oil, and that's the reason why we opted for Russian oil. And in fact, Americans were very much on board. But when the Prime Minister goes to the UAE, when you have the Sheikh coming over here to India, we're talking about good, kind of ties with Israel. Clearly, we are looking at our alternative energy needs. But also very quickly over here, when the government keeps on talking about biofuels, we are obviously looking at alternatives so that we don't have to depend completely globally as far as crude oil or energy imports are concerned.
Yes.
So again, I go back to double strategy.
Pallavi, I'm so sorry, I'll have to interrupt you, but that's all from me, Sukanya Sawan, CNN News 18. But Pallavi, Aman and Akansha continue to stay with us because news and updates on this historic trade deal between US and India will continue on the other side.